Okay, cool. Thanks. So just a quick overview of the agenda so you have an idea of what's coming. First, I'll introduce ourselves so you have an idea of like who you're hearing from. Then we'll go into some objectives of the session just so you can get a feel for what we're hoping you walk away with. And then we'll go through this evaluation case, discuss how we did it, our lessons learned. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit of Q&A, first facilitated by our moderator, and then we'll open it up to you all for any questions that you have. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about us. As you can see here, we're all affiliated with Claremont Graduate University. Sonia and I are PhD students in the evaluation program. Kaisine is a PsyD student studying organizational psychology. Emily is a recent graduate. She just received her master's in evaluation. And then Dr. Jennifer Villalobos, who will be joining us in about 30 minutes as she's wrapping up another commitment. She is actually a professor that we've all had the privilege of being instructed by. She's also a CGU alumna, receiving her PhD in evaluation and positive organizational psychology. So next, let's talk about these session objectives. Because before we dive into the evaluation case, we just want to briefly prime you on the purpose of this presentation and what we hope you take away. So firstly, we're hoping that you walk away knowing some approaches to evaluating AI tools, as well as their potential limitations. We also hope that you walk away having a sense of the value of using mixed methods approaches as opposed to just purely quantitative approaches. We also hope you have some ideas about ways to navigate client challenges and how we balance them with our own knowledge of study design. We'll also talk about the differences between human-centered evaluation and one utilizing synthetic data. And just before we move on, we wanted to just get a feel for your attitudes and use of AI, if at all. So if you could just take a moment to respond to a poll that should be popping up for you now. And we'll just give you about 30 seconds to respond to that. Okay, thank you for sharing that. And then also, I think you all should be able to see the results.
Yes, I see it.
Could you just read them off really quick, Emily?
I shared that I use AI to help organize my thoughts. I see in the chat, why when you wrote that you'll be on the road, so you'll follow along. So, thank you for sharing why, and thank you for being here today.
Okay, so now we'll just talk a little bit about why this matters. So currently, the market is saturated with AI tools for various purposes, with new ones popping up every day. So in cases like that of our clients who are trying to create something positive and fill a specific need, they need to know how to make their tools stand out and offer something unique. Also, there are mixed opinions of AI, and there's pros and cons of using it. And as our knowledge of the environmental costs of AI grows, it is fair and important to be able to assess the extent to which these tools add value to people's lives. And so in this study, these were some of the big picture questions that we were wondering about. Next slide, please. So now let's get into the evaluation. Firstly, what were we evaluating? We were evaluating TrueNorth. So TrueNorth is an artificial intelligence chat tool designed to support early career STEM professionals by providing literature-based professional advice. So this tool was developed by Claremont Graduate University students in the Center for Information Science and Technology. And so users would interact with TrueNorth similar to other large language model chat tools like ChatGPT or Google Gemini by prompting the tool with questions. However, TrueNorth is meant to function like a career advisor or mentor and is designed to answer questions related to professional challenges. And so the TrueNorth development team created this tool in response to challenges they noticed in their own experiences and those noted in the literature. For example, the STEM workforce is continuously growing. However, this growth is accompanied by high attrition rates due to lack of belonging and support, instability felt in careers, and identity challenges. So, AI has the potential to be a low-cost approach to solving some of these challenges. Next slide, please. So a little bit about um, a little bit more about the questions that we asked. So the purpose of this study was to gain a human-centered understanding of the effectiveness of TrueNorth, including users' perceptions and the extent to which the intended outcomes of the tools were met. And the reason that we just emphasize the term human-centered here is because a lot of the existing work that we had to draw from was focused on objective metrics like using synthetic data or even employing other AI tools as the judge rather than focusing on users' perceptions. And so these are the questions that focused this study. We wanted to know again, what are users' perceptions of TrueNorth? Do some of their existing impressions of AI influence their perceptions and use of TrueNorth? To what extent does TrueNorth meet its intended outcomes? And how well does TrueNorth's literature base align with user needs, which you'll hear a little bit more about later. And so now I'll go through the study design with you all. So in order to answer these questions, it was a collaborative process. And so, in fact, the original design that we brought to the TrueNorth team was not what we ended up going with. So we went back to the drawing board to produce something that would be useful to them, not just what we thought would be best. But of course, in this collaboration, when we made different design choices to meet their needs, we were also sure to flag any potential limitations that could come up just so that they could be aware. So first, in terms of the sampling method, we used purposive snowball sampling primarily through our personal networks to recruit early career STEM professionals, which includes undergraduate and graduate students majoring in STEM-related fields. And it also includes professionals with less than 5 years of experience in STEM roles. And so also, participants were offered no incentive to participate beyond having access to the tool as a resource. So those who expressed that they wanted to participate were able to follow a link that included instructions on how to participate, consent information, and a link to the pre-survey, which included questions about user perceptions of AI, advice-seeking habits, and intended outcomes of TrueNorth before using the tool. Then after completing the pre-survey, they received instructions and a link to begin using TrueNorth. We asked participants to use TrueNorth for 2 weeks, interacting with it at least 3 times a week. And so we defined an interaction as including at least 2 questions or prompts. So by the end of the 2 weeks, they should have used TrueNorth at least 6 times and asked it about 12 questions. Then, after this 2-week period, we sent them a link to the post survey, which included user perceptions of TrueNorth and intended outcomes of TrueNorth. And so all in all, we used a combination of scales found in the literature and scales and questions developed by our team to answer the evaluation questions. Again, because it was very important for us to capture as much useful information for the TrueNorth team to aid in the development of the tool. Next slide. So now we'll take a closer look at some of these skills that I described in our design. So firstly, we did utilize some validated skills. Since we were evaluating user experiences with technology, we consulted some of our UX peers and looked into UX being user experiences and looked into the UX literature to see what scales they commonly used that would be appropriate for our study. So one of them being the trust and automation scale, which we used in the pre-test and post-test, looking at trust in AI so that we could be able to see if users' perceptions of AI were related to their perceptions of TrueNorth. We also used the system's usability scale on the post-test only. This usability scale is pretty widely used, and it looks at users' perceptions of the tool's interface and ability to navigate it, which this was important to the developers to understand whether or not TrueNorth was designed in a way that was easy to use. And next, I'll talk about some of the scales and items that we developed. Next slide, please. So, for the TrueNorth intended outcome scale, which we used on the pre-test and the post-test, we developed items that were aligned with the development team's intended outcomes and the literature around the needs and supports for STEM professionals. So the items covered things like navigating conflict, seeking support, confidence, communication skills, understanding norms and expectations, negotiation, advocacy, and turnover intention. And so we wanted to see if their score on this scale changed between the two time points. Also on the pre and post test, we asked participants of their likelihood of using AI for a variety of tasks to understand more about participants' AI use and what specific tasks they used it for. And so the task list that we used came from a paper exploring how people use ChatGPT. We also asked participants the same questions in the post test, but specifically asked about the likelihood of using TrueNorth for these tasks. And so not only did this provide some interesting information as is, but we could also use it to see if existing use of AI habits were related to perceptions of TrueNorth and participants' likelihood of using TrueNorth. Also on the pretest, we asked participants about where they sought advice and how valuable they found that advice to be. These additional questions helped us learn more about participants' advice-seeking habits, which can help the TrueNorth team learn more about the need for such a tool. And then getting back to user perceptions, on the post-test, we asked participants to rate the quality of TrueNorth's responses to prompts and how likely they were to recommend TrueNorth to a friend or colleague. Next slide, please. And so we also asked a couple open-ended questions. Because given the possibility of low sample size or insignificant results, we wanted to ensure that we could gain information beyond just those changes between time points. So for this extra coverage, we also included some qualitative questions. So on the pretest, we asked, as early career STEM professionals, what needs do you have that you could use support in navigating? And we asked this to learn more about the needs and to be able to see if the needs that they named were aligned with the tool's literature base, which includes the PERMA-4 framework, negotiation skills, way to stand out as a leader, and research leadership. On the post, we asked, how did TrueNorth help you over the past 2 weeks? And also, what would you change to improve the experience of using TrueNorth? And again, we asked this to see if the tool is being used as intended or in ways that the developers did not expect. Also, it was a really nice way to get recommendations directly from the members of the population that they intended to serve. So that was just an overview of our scales and our design. And now I'll pass it to Emily, who will start discussing the findings.
Thanks, Kayla. Before we go into the findings, I want to hop into a quick question that we have for everybody, for you, Mark and Nazia, about the construct. So if you were evaluating an AI chatbot, now that we've reviewed the scales, what kinds of questions would you ask? Or are there any constructs that you'd want to include? So we're going to launch a poll real quick, and we'd love to hear your response. Also, feel free to put it in the chat if that's easier. Share however is most meaningful or easy for you. And since we're a small group too, if you're able to come off mute, uh, we also welcome that as well. We'll continue thinking about that. Any responses, or should we just move on forward?
We may continue.
Okay. So now I'm going to dive into a little bit now that we have a full understanding of the background, our methods and questions, I want to share a bit about who we ended up participating in our evaluation. So initially in the pre-survey, we collected 17 responses. After 2 weeks, individuals were sent the post-survey. And as we mentioned, right, reminders to complete the post-survey were sent, and this actually doubled our responses. And so in total, we received 10 post-survey responses. After doing some data cleaning, two of those individuals who completed the post-survey indicated that they didn't use TrueNorth. And this is really important for us as well to capture folks who may not have used TrueNorth and to understand why. So in our survey, we integrated some questions to ask about a little bit more about why those two individuals didn't use TrueNorth over the 2 weeks, and it was other competing priorities like midterms, or it wasn't a priority to them. So then after that data cleaning, our final matched sample size was a total of 8 participants. And from those 8, we can really break down, right, who participated because it's just a small sample size. So we have a wide variety, both participants in school for various things, including nursing and information systems, and some working professionals as well in positions like regulatory specialists and information security. And so now that we know a little bit about who participated, we'll share a selection of the results pertinent to today's conversation. So first, I'm going to go on to talk about user perception of TrueNorth. So to answer this question, we calculated the descriptive statistics of the post-survey questions that ask specifically about TrueNorth. So this includes quality of response, their individual rating of recommendation of TrueNorth, and the composite scores for the likelihood that they would use TrueNorth for specific tasks, their trust in TrueNorth, and the usability of TrueNorth. So also to note, when calculating these composite scores, we applied pairwise deletion for any NAs or any omitted responses. And so from this graph, right, you can see that the mean score for quality of response is somewhere between acceptable and exceptional, with a mean of 7.5. So conversely, respondents were less likely to recommend TrueNorth, with a mean response only a mean score of 3.0 of recommending TrueNorth. And this, having a higher rating of quality compared to recommendations of TrueNorth is generally expected based on previous studies where individuals, likelihood to recommend is generally much lower than their rating of quality. And so also with regard to trust and usability, respondents on average agreed that they trusted and that they found TrueNorth usable. Also, to answer this question about perception of TrueNorth, we asked those 2 qualitative questions in the post survey. So here you see 2 individual responses. The first one to the how did TrueNorth help you over the past 2 weeks? So for this individual, it helped them weigh options pertaining to a job or internship in their field. And then as related to what individuals would change to improve the experience of using TrueNorth, one individual remarked about the tone of the chatbot itself. So they remarked that they would have liked it to be a bit more casual. So you can see some sort of those kind of responses from our qualitative findings. Next, I want to share some item level mean scores from our usability measures. Right. These are useful because they can help the developer team know a little bit more about user perceptions of TrueNorth. So from this, we see that respondents found TrueNorth easy to use. It was quick to learn how to use it, and people felt confident. Lower on that score, you see in the circle in the pink, people were less likely to use TrueNorth frequently. And this might connect back to also, right, the findings of our post score about recommending TrueNorth. Those 2 scores sort of align, right? So we see areas of alignment. Next, I'm going to talk about our sub-question. So like Kayla mentioned at the beginning, a sub-question that we had is we wanted to assess if someone's prior perception of AI would influence their perception of TrueNorth. And so to do this, we conducted 5 linear regression models with indicators from the pre-survey, specifically their perception of quality, their recommendation of TrueNorth, usability, using TrueNorth for specific tasks, and trust. We measured their responses in there and saw if it was influenced by their likelihood to use AI and their trust in AI. And given the small sample size, we ran bootstrapping was employed to estimate the 95% confidence intervals and p-values. But when conducting those linear regressions, we found no significance for any of these models. So for example, I have a write-up from the quality of TrueNorth on the next. Yeah, so you see here that neither the likelihood to use AI or trust in AI were significant predictors for how people rated their quality of TrueNorth. So despite these insignificant results, we wanted to dig deeper and look at the item level mean differences between some of the scores. So for today, we'll look at the mean differences between the likelihood to use AI and TrueNorth for specific tasks. So here on this slide, we have those specific tasks that we asked about, right? And we see generally not much differences between the mean scores of individuals' likelihood to use AI for those specific tasks in TrueNorth. I think the one item where there was um, likelihood for TrueNorth to be more used was making decisions. That's why I have a circle around that. On the next slide, we'll share about the differences in pre-post between trust. And here we see something interesting as well, right? Overall, individuals on average rated higher levels of trust in TrueNorth. And this, when we're thinking about it, could be due to the methodology, right? Since we used our professional networks for the main sampling of this study, people might have affiliated TrueNorth with us as individuals. And so this is something to think forward with methodology, and we'll talk more about in the discussion section. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Sonia to talk about more of the findings.
Right. Thank you, Emily. So now that we have talked about the usability of the chatbot, and we also talked about how this ties into um, current perceptions of artificial intelligence, our second set of findings looked at the self-generated skills that Keela mentioned a few minutes ago. These are ones that we developed with the four of us in conjunction and in partnership with the coders of the chatbot. So these were part of the literature, and we mostly looked at the challenges of early STEM career professionals, especially at this career stage. When we assess the change, we measure a set of intended outcomes. And before people use the tool, so we had the 2 weeks of use and after, and to check whether the scores really move, we had a Wilcoxon Science Ranks test, which is simply a stats test based for small groups like ours, so 8 people. At the results, no statistically significant difference before and after. So we had a V of 8.5, and you can see on the screen our p-value was also pretty indicative of not significant results. However, with only 8 matched participants, we don't have the power to claim a change either way. It doesn't mean that nothing happened. It just means we cannot prove it yet. And this is we can see this fully when we look at the next slide. Once we look at those means by the specific scale. So before, on the baseline level, before we get the people to use the chatbot for 2 weeks, we see that the composite score of all of those items was 5.11, and then that score in it's aggregative of items like I have effective interpersonal communication skills, intention to remain in the STEM field. I believe that the person can reach their full potential, knowing where to ask for help when challenges arise, and access to constructive feedback, and access to the support that they need to be successful in STEM fields. And there was a wide array of STEM professions that they chose in their demographic scale. And we see that with the last one being the lowest, all scores were above 4 right before the 2 week use. And then we had them use this for about a few weeks, and then we get to see those scores. The composite is now 5.1. And we see a few general increases. If we look at the bars in general, now they're at least 5, even though we didn't have any significant results. And then one of the results that was most notable for us was when challenges arise, I know where to get help. So that means that when we prompt the participants to use this AI tool at least 3 times a week, we get to see that towards the end of it, although we don't have a control group to specifically make the claim, they at least know where to get help whether that is because of the resources that the AI tool provided or because or recommended or because they're using the AI tool themselves is yet to be determined. But we do detect that change. And then the other one that was notable for us was the access to the support to be successful in this field, which is also related of knowing where to get help and kind of supporting that kind of showing that there's a support of like a little bit of being successful. So that went from 4.8 to 5.375. And like I mentioned, this skill is yet to be validated, but this was kind of one of the kind of contributions of us of learning how to evaluate a chatbot. A lot of us in program evaluation kind of have this close partnership with the program developers to just make sure that the items in the scales kind of reflect their intentions, hence the intended outcomes. Because when they programmed this tool and when they coded this throughout the years, throughout 2025, a little bit of 2024, this was kind of what they had in mind. So we paired with the literature, and this is what we find so far. And then when we do look at this in the next slide, we also looked at the literature-based alignment. So when we looked at the questions, one of the questions that we had is whether the system as is programmed and as is coded is useful for early career STEM professionals. If the way that it's set up, the way that it's functioning right now, it's actually meant or that has like the capabilities to help people how the programmers are intending for them to help. So Kayla shared the open-ended questions when we were describing the scales. So a few of the relevant themes that came up when we asked people to share their needs for for the STEM profession, the three main themes were kind of more on the level of kind of wanting to need support at this transition of early career. Uh, this might have been because we promoted it as a um, career coaching or career guidance AI tool, and almost all of the participants are in this transition stage from student to emerging professional. So the major three themes when we ask them kind of reflect that they want career advice on career pathways, they want roles to explore, and they want to know how to be a strong candidate. Um, so although this was meant to be coded to kind of be an assistant for those interpersonal and nuanced challenges that you have day to day as an early career STEM professional, the themes and the needs that they do have are more of the career coaching sense. So they also would like a tool that would help them develop like professional networks. And the one small but notable technical detail is that they also said that they would like to make sense of information and data. And then although these needs do not really align with the TrueNorth's literature base, a lot of the literature base and a lot of the information that was inputted into the AI chatbot mostly came from positive psychology. And although it does inform the tone and the way that it's communicating with participants, there is a little bit of that mismatch, especially with how it's being promoted right now as a career coaching. Tool and how people are kind of the needs that they have and how they're intending to use it. And then we have a few implications and limitations of the study that Kaisin will share.
Okay, so for this evaluation, our team does acknowledge that there were several limitations that would have influenced how the results were interpreted. So just starting off with the sample size. So despite having a small sample exploratory evaluation of just 8 individuals, it still really offered preliminary insights into participants' experience with TrueNorth and indicated areas of improvement for future users. And this is just really useful in understanding how TrueNorth engagement looks like in a real-world context. But because it is relatively small, it makes the finding of the study not generalizable across the STEM professions, highlighting the need for TrueNorth to not just aim towards recruiting more individuals for future studies, but to also recruit individuals of various STEM professions and stages and backgrounds to better understand the impact of TrueNorth. And when we're talking about the ordering, it really refers to the way that the items were ordered in the survey to enhance the credibility and validity of the final results. So prior to launching our survey, we actually reordered the item with the intent to minimize the likelihood of participants' decision being influenced by the items they have already answered, and to also improve the quality of responses provided by the participants. However, the team's restructure of the items could have also influenced the way the quality and consistency of the responses collected. So we recognize that some survey items could have also benefited from clearer wording to improve how the participants could have responded. And because time was moving fairly quickly for this evaluation of TrueNorth, because it was done to align with the semester of the course and to account for the process it takes to receive IRB approval, it really limited our ability to observe long-term patterns. So while participants were asked to interact with TrueNorth for only 2 weeks, we do suggest a longer length of interaction because it could have revealed additional findings that could not have been captured in those 2 weeks alone. And this study actually did not have an incentive, which was a challenge in itself in recruiting while working with a ticking clock. This may mean that potential participants were less likely to be motivated to dedicate their time and effort to participate in our evaluation. So it really emphasized the potential benefits of incentive and how it can bring, it can be more beneficial for recruitment for future studies. And finally, because the study did not have a control group, it means that there was no way of knowing if the findings found from the evaluation were from the participants' interaction with TrueNorth or from any external factors. So this indicates a direction for future studies of TrueNorth to involve a control group to strengthen the validity of the findings and show a comparison between engagement with and no engagement with TrueNorth. So all in all, it just shows that TrueNorth does show promise as a supportive tool for individuals in the STEM field. And it is just one step closer to knowing the true impact that TrueNorth intends to bring. And because the results did reveal opportunities for improvements, such as personalization and ways to encourage use over longer periods of time. And for similar AI-driven tools like TrueNorth, this evaluation really highlights the importance of integrating human-centered evaluation to enhance future iterations of these type of tools. And it shows that tool usability and concerns can also emerge in really small evaluations as well. So while the sample may be small, there's still a story for us to just hear and learn from. And when taking it all together, the use of AI is becoming increasingly common and its impact can be felt in the evaluation field. And this evaluation highlights that rather than turning away from the use of AI, evaluators may potentially benefit from learning how to navigate with using AI in evaluation to ensure that AI-driven tools are not only ethically designed, but they are designed to meet the needs of its intended users. So ultimately, evaluation may just be that bridge that can enhance the perception and the use of AI-driven tools. And now I'm just going to hand it off to Sonia to wrap up this presentation with comparing the findings in this evaluation, then to human participants with the synthetic evaluation of TrueNorth that jump-started this current evaluation.
Thanks, Casey. So that is all for the study that we conducted for the past 2 semesters. And then we'd like to share a little bit of a backstory to what inspired us to evaluate TrueNorth for human participants and kind of what led to the question of us kind of taking a step back and evaluating use and perceptions of AI, and kind of like generating our own scale before delving deep dive into like an impact and whether people can have significant changes in STEM. This was an evaluation that was conducted by the students at Claremont Graduate University, the computer science department, when they initially coded this chatbot. The way that the coding process works in that end is that they also have an evaluation side. However, usually their evaluation end is also generated synthetically. So they ask AI to generate the data. They ask AI to evaluate that data, and then ask AI to kind of do the linker style scales. And I'll get to the process in a second. But what happens with the process is when you have a tool that is kind of in development, being evaluated by an AI tool, what ends up happening is that things end up looking a little bit more pristine than what they actually are, and we're robbed of kind of learning like those nuances that we just shared throughout the results section. So like, do they use those things? Do they not use those things? Are they useful? Are they not useful? Do they fit into the context of early career STEM professionals or any other intended audience that developers have when they code chatbots or any other AI assistance tool? So how they did the evaluation is that they wrote 116 practice questions, like the kinds of things that a STEM professional might actually ask, like how to handle difficult manager, how to cope with burnout. They didn't invent the topics randomly. They were based on the literature, most notably from this paper, Claremont 2020. Um, and they sorted the questions into category like career advancement, mentorship. Those categories were based of that paper as well. Um, so they fed all of those 116 questions into one of the very first iterations of TrueNorth. That was not even the iteration that ended up making into the human evaluation round. Usually with these tools, there is a lot of iterations where things just continuously get coded and coded and coded and coded. So this was like the way before this chatbot fell into our labs. But this 116 practice questions, it was fed into the chatbot as it was, and it let it generate an answer each one. So it was a question um, of there is of kind of like a synthetic problem being like, I have a challenge with this area, again determined by the literature, and the chatbot just generating those answers. Once there was a script of those 116 questions, um TrueNorth was answering they writing the answers with the Google's Gemini model, and this is something we'll get to hear tomorrow with the session, how they trained the chatbot with Google Gemini. Um, and instead of having the 116 humans read and grade all of those answers, they used, and like I said, a second completely separate AI. So this was Claude last year to act as the grader. So it scored every answer from 1 to 5 on 14 different qualities, like usefulness, trustworthiness, accessibility, and following a detailed rubric, so it graded consistently. And those all metrics are on the table on this slide. Again, that was also gotten from literature of how computer science professionals usually tend to approach evaluations of their tools, not only AI, but just anything that they do in general. It's very metric based. Um, and once that was graded, um, now we had the 116 answers, each graded in the 14 qualities. So let's not get lost on the individual numbers. That is a table that looks a little bit too graded. But here's what it's asking is that when remember that every question had a category tag, like a school subject, to test on the line. So to fit those categories into the metrics, they did a chi-square. And it's just checking one thing. The TrueNorth's grades depend on the subject. So was it great at mentorship questions, but bad at burnout questions, or was it about equally good and no matter the topic? So for 11 of the 14 qualities that you have in the table, um, it it really was too much of a dependence on the chi-square. That means that TrueNorth performed consistently. Um, Only 3 qualities show real differences, and those are the ones that would target for improvement. Um, so the synthetic test, let's use the 116 scenarios across the 14 qualities. That is more than 8 participants, but it could never tell us what a real person does. And it never helps decide, would ask questions about real case scenarios or ask those questions in the sense of how the job market looks. Also, so the synthetic evaluation kind of gives like some breadth and consistency, which is a good first step. But the human side, which is what we presented today, the four of us, can give us like a real lived experience. And we need both. So with that, we kind of close off this presentation. And this is just like a nice side of side comparison of when computer science students approach evaluation as opposed to when people who have been trained in this field kind of approach evaluating something like an AI tool the way we've look at social science or social good programs or just programs in the social sector. And now I have the distinct pleasure of passing it off to Dr. Villalobos, who will have some questions for us and will moderate the discussion.
Great, thank you. And well done, Sonia, Kaisine, Emily, and Kayla. What a great study. And really nice kind of to put some real data with AI tools because a lot of us in eval are using them, and this was a really great effort. Hello to everyone who's watching this recording, but also to you, Mark and Nazia, who are here. Thank you for being here for this session. Before I start to ask you all questions about the work that you just presented, I just want to share that this is day one of a 2-day session. So for those of you that don't know, tomorrow's day two, which is on development and evaluation, new frontiers for the social sector. And that'll be tomorrow from 1:30 into 2 p.m. Pacific time. 1:30 to 2, is that great?
2:30.
Or to 3. That's what I thought. Okay. 1:30 to 3 Pacific time. So make sure that you join in because it'll extend on the work that was presented today. So like Sonia said, my name is Jennifer Villalobos. I am an assistant professor and I'm faculty chair of evaluation at Claremont Graduate University. And I have the great pleasure of having had all four of the presenters in my class at different times. And they are just the best of the best, I can tell you that. So I just want to start with a question, right? The first one being, maybe we can advance the slide once. There you go. So what principles from program evaluation did your team draw on when evaluating the chatbot?
I think because with novel technology, it's easy for us to fall into the trap of kind of going straight into impact, which is something that often happens with real world programs as well. But just going to this principle that we should go to use and whether it's working and kind of those like process and formative type of evaluations just to get a sense and dig deep into the chatbot. That's kind of we got into the literature-based question and how we got to assess if those really help how they're meant to be helped.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
great.
adding on to what Sonia said, also where our drive for this project was also for the ultimate improvement and benefit, which is sort of different. For some context, this project was done within the parameters of our survey methods course at CGU as well. And so a lot of our other peers were doing purely research-oriented projects. For them had a different purpose, right? Their purpose being to understand underlying theory or underlying concepts. Whereas for us, we really prioritized one, our partnership with the developers of TrueNorth, as well as that partnership leading to ultimate feedback that would inform their ultimate development of TrueNorth.
Yeah, that's great. I love the translational approach. It's very applied eval focus. Anyone else?
Maybe just the only thing to add would be that, and Emily spoke to this a little bit, but just, our whole design process being very like client forward and being led by them. So kind of like, as I mentioned, way early at the beginning, we had a kind of like an evaluation plan that we kind of drafted based off what we thought they wanted and where we thought they'd want it to go. And when we
Yeah.
presented it to them, they were kind of like, oh, well, that's not really, what we were thinking. We really want to know this. And so, we went back to the drawing board because, you know, I think that original version was kind of led by like what we thought would be interesting or useful, but what's really most important is what they're going to use and what they're going to use, to develop the tool. So, um, yeah, I would say that
Mhm.
that's like a pretty important principle that we applied in this process.
Yeah, I bet that set you apart too from some of the other groups, where typically in researcher you would have the control and eval. You're certainly giving that power back to your client. So that's great. Okay, moving forward, I'm curious, because I know that a lot of us are probably not familiar with this literature, but how did your team work through the literature base that underpins the chatbot, the AI tool, and how does that connect to the way that it functions?
I can talk about this a little. So
Okay.
as you can tell, like our survey was really just mainly focused on like the usability, so like the user experience. So unfortunately, we weren't able to really like touch on like, the framework that TrueNorth was based on, which is why we did ask some open-ended questions to maybe like shed light into like, what we can kind of see, but then like a majority of the focus was really like, a different constructs that we were measuring. So I mean, moving forward, I feel like, with future iterations and knowing how to better reword the questions, we might be able to align the literature with our findings a little bit more.
Okay, great. Does anyone want to build on that or?
Yeah, I think that one finding of the early career STEM professionals wanting to use this a little bit of more of a um career kind of network, career slash network base where they could see a little bit more of information about jobs and opportunities. When we
Mhm,
delivered the results to the student coders and their advisor, this wasn't a consideration that they already had. And this is something that will potentially continue to inform the literature base. But I think this
mhm,
this this aspect of literature base was kind of the turning point for us is after we understood how it works and how we were explained how it works. Because then we were able to see like, oh, this is like the underlying mechanism, and this is if these are the inputs of the program, then we should assess those just to see if it's actually working how they would like the chatbot to work. So just as we evaluate any other
mhm,
program.
mhm. Great. Yeah, perfect. Thanks for expanding on that. Um, so you hinted at this a little bit, moving on to the next question at the end of the presentation about the differences between evaluating a social sector program, like we do in program eval, and then evaluating an AI system, right, like a tool, and how the team that you worked with may have evaluated differently, given that it was tool and technology versus a program. So I guess what did your team see as any of those meaningful differences between these two types of evaluations?
I can speak a little bit to that. I think for me, the biggest thing, where that stood out was like the approach, like the study design, and then also like the measures that we use. So because this is like, a technology that users are using, we kind of leaned into the user experience literature to kind of see, okay, how do people, I guess, evaluate or assess technology, but still in like a user or human centered way, because we we found both things. There's some things that are very like metric focused, very objective, but there were some ways to kind of really get at user perceptions, and so we just had to kind of like dive into the literature, see what people were using, and then also which I think is kind of common in evaluation, just kind of consulting people who are experts in that area. So lucky for us, there are user experience students at Claremont Graduate University. So we did reach out to one of them and say, hey, this is what we're doing, in your courses. How do you guys typically work through something like this? And so that's actually how we got some of the inspiration for the study design.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And to Kayla's point, some like a difference that I was not anticipating is just this program partner engagement. It's very
Mm.
similar. So the considerations, the constant check-ins, the kind of sharing of the results, this kind of like this kind of like last conversation where you have when they're like, oh, I didn't consider this. This will definitely like inform the first version, whether that's like through coding or more programs. It was a very similar process, and I was not anticipating that similarity.
Yeah. And would you argue the implications are just as big with evaluating AI chatbot than a social sector program?
Maybe yes and no. Yes, in the sense that a social sector program and then like a technology-based program, especially more kind of like have the intention of like helping people, and both of them have that underlying motivation. Depending on kind of like the further ethical considerations, which you also have in social sector programs, and kind of like the other stakes that there are with like AI systems, um, and the fact that technology does move at a more rapid pace than social sector programs, the implications can change a little bit. But in terms of if social good is kind of like merging with AI, and if that merge fully happens, I can see those implications like merging as well.
Mm. Some
Great. Yeah.
Kayla, raise your hand.
Go ahead.
No, Emily, go first. I saw you were unmuted. I just raised my hand so I wouldn't forget.
Okay. Yeah, I'm musing as we're all talking because I think when Dr. Villa was when you asked the first question, I was thinking mainly about sampling and how in a traditional social sector program you have a concrete like here is the community that we serve versus for these AI systems it could be like in future iterations of this evaluation maybe the sampling would be a pop-up on the AI platform itself so that way it's more random but like the community it serves is also a little bit more mushy and a little less concrete. And so I think that is a meaningful difference in the implications as well as your the second follow-up question was. As Sonia was talking, it made me think about the implications, right, of evaluation are in all evaluation is going to be for who the community it's serving. It's like in a social sector program, the implications are going to be, just as big as an AI because it impacts individual lives in an individual way. Um, but as we were chatting too, I was thinking of ways that these kind of tools might be integrated into like as Sonia was saying, into social service. So like in a career advising office, maybe they would have this as an offering as part of their programming, and then it could be evaluated distinctly from the social service project or in tandem. So just I think this jumps ahead a little bit to future iterations or what this could look in the future,
Yeah.
but I think that's sort of how they're differentiating as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Great. Thanks. I had two other questions. I don't think we have time for them. I've maybe one, but I first wanted to see, are there any questions from those that are here that you would like to ask? And we would prioritize that as the final question. Okay, then maybe we can just end with really quick couple thoughts on um, what broader insights have emerged about where the eval field is going from this project.
One thing I can speak to a bit is so I guess something that stood out to me was one when we're comparing like the synthetic data to the human data. um I thought when I was reading the paper where they used that synthetic evaluation, I was really impressed. Like it's very thorough. It's like a great design. But like, and Sonia spoke a little bit to this, the thing that it's missing is just like that human opinion, because we really can't use that synthetic evaluation to be able to speak to the value that it brings to a person, because it's like objectively the quality of the prompts were fine, but that doesn't mean that a person like actually needs it. And I think that even in our human-centered evaluation, we started to kind of chip away at that, getting to that value. But, I think further questions we could ask would look at, how likely are they to use TrueNorth over some of these other tools and resources on the market? Because, again, even in our human-centered evaluation where we use real people, they the results show that they felt like it was quality, like the tool works fine, but we still have that question of, is it providing them with something useful and valuable that they actually need? And so I think that that's kind of like, those are the questions that we need to continue pursuing beyond just like,
Yeah.
beyond just quality. Is like, is it actually valuable? Do we need it? Do does it need further resources poured into it in time and things like that? Or maybe we should pivot. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are some of the questions that this has led me into thinking about.
Yeah. Well, those are great thoughts to end on. I think we can advance a few slides just to the thank you. Oh, there's a question here. If you're happy, if you want to stay and answer that, I think that'd be good.
Yeah, Mark wrote, since evaluation is client focused, does that methodology evolve alongside True North, improving iterations depending on needs, or does it stay the same?
That's something that kind of will be part of the discussion tomorrow, but based on the feedback that we gave them on the first iteration, a little bit, yes, especially because as we delve into the literature of how other people are kind of studying or assessing or evaluating evaluation systems, there's a lot of mixed methods. And I think the more um people use this and the more uses kind of like develop, because there are different interpretations of career coaching, there are different interpretations of STEM. They will definitely have the methods used to evaluate those tools will definitely have to adopt those uses and those new changes. And I feel like that will further strengthen that partnership and communication between developers and program evaluators.
Mm.
And then Nasia has the question of how will we measure whether the chatbot successfully solves the user's problem? What key performance indicators, KPIs, should we use to evaluate chatbot effectiveness? Um, I think this is where qualitative data becomes really rich. In the literature, almost every component of the study had either a focus group or interview or some sort of journaling process. And although the language of KPIs and metrics and numbers is very appealing and can attract a lot of audiences, we can't really get to the sense of effectiveness and actually helping people if we don't really get a sense of how people are reacting to these things. So some of, as any other evaluation, some of more are more rich discussions and like sense an opportunity for future directions. They came from the qualitative coding of the themes of the open-ended questions that we had in the surveys. Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I think we can end on the last slide, which is just another plug for your part two of your tomorrow. I hope you will be there. And thank you so much for your great work, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you, Mark and Nasia, for coming.
Thank you all.